on TikTok and I was talking about like a bunch of things, but really it was just about like, allowing people just to do what they do and what is the actual negative outcome that comes out of that. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about like violence and things like that, but really what comes out of just letting a person do them, regardless if you agree with them or not. And really the only thing is that because you were then not in control of that person anymore, and you kind of really have to like base, like you have to have like confidence actually in like what you believe in without other people really believing in that. Like I sat there and I thought, and I was just like, okay, well, I know a lot of people, they feel like a negative consequence of people just doing them is it influencing their children, influencing those around them or whatever. And the first thing that comes to my mind is like, is it influencing them or is it inspiring them? A great example for me is that the reason why a lot of us love art and we love like celebrity culture and all that is because these things are usually pushing the norm or the boundary of what we're so forced into, which has inspired a lot of us to want to be in art and, whatever realm that is in art, that has inspired a lot of us to speak up and to kind of like think differently or whatever. So for me, I grew up in a household and an environment and a family that really didn't value understanding emotions and trying to find ways how to navigate through like the highs and the lows. And so when I would be on like YouTube and stuff and I was hearing things from like Maya Angelou and like just Black people that were okay with talking about their trauma, okay with talking about their happiness, that were laughing, that were crying, that, that didn't see sadness and crying as a weakness, that dared to travel the world and to stand in what they believed in, that inspired me and made me realize like, wow, okay, yes, like that is normal, and trying to, like I felt like I had to, trying to repress those things isn't normal. That's what throws people off and because you want people to stay in your thing on how you see it. And so being inspired. But also I want to say that I feel like we all have that thing within us that understands what true freedom looks like, regardless of the state that we're all in right now, regardless of the states that we've been in for however long. On a soul basis, we get it. It's kind of also like why the majority of us, when we see like a landscape and the waterfalls and just the nature, even if we've never really even dive deep into the nature of it all, there's still this feeling that we have because our soul, our body, our mind, all of it knows that we are connected to that, and we really should be doing that and not like in all these institutions and doing all this weird shit that we have been doing. So when you have a child or you have a person in general that becomes entirely something that they are not in no way at all, that means that the foundation of who they are has been shamed and unlistened to so much to where they are so afraid to listen to that part of themselves. They are so afraid to stand in who they are regardless of what is going on around them. They have this mindset that it's more about becoming what you think other people want to see, that you think is going to give you this false sense of safety, of desirability, of confidence. It's more about that than being who you actually are and listening to that part, which most children and people learn by their parents, which most people and children learn by the social structure of the shaming, of propaganda, of all these things. Your job, whether that is as a parent or as just like an older person, wanting to help and have, play a part in teaching and whatever, your job is to make them understand that those original thoughts, whatever comes up mentally, physically, emotionally, they should learn how to listen to, how to trust, how to navigate. When you're able to do that, you then are able to ask yourself, are these things that I should really be following? And I should be standing on, even within the face, even when in front of people who have a completely different way of thinking than me. You should be teaching them that shame has no place when navigating these things and while letting yourself feel these things. Shame also does not play a part in when you are around other people that have different belief systems than you. It's not about shaming. It's about standing on what you believe on, though, because that is your experience. Because that's another thing. Like, a lot of children are really being taught at these really young ages, like, as soon as someone's different than them, like, to immediately go into the judging and shaming and bullying. And that's not just something that happens naturally. Like, they are taught that. And again, it's not just something that they do to other people. They internalize that shame. You also have to be practicing what you preach, which I think is also another thing that so many children are seeing their parents in these repressed states, and they're seeing how the negative effects or the negative reactions that they do have to people who are different, because they've also been shamed into, like, that's how you treat people that are different. And so it's just this pattern that just keeps on happening and happening. And so then you do have a bunch of people who have no sense of self, that aren't willing to stand on things regardless if people or believe in it or not. But you do have some people, and though the children that feel that and really can't not listen to that, or the children that do come across those people, that ignites something in them. Now, I do believe, though, that sometimes, again, the children and the people who don't have any type of, have never been taught to kind of listen to themselves, it is easy for them, even if they do want to listen to themselves and they do want to be in that freedom or whatever that means to them. They don't understand, though, that it's not necessarily about looking at someone else that is making you feel free and that is pushing the boundary or whatever, and just completely latching on to them and their idea and their personality or whatever, or just how they're doing things. That really is just about, like, okay, yeah, people do think differently, and, like, letting that inspire you, and then taking that and creating whatever that looks like to you. Because again, it's not about, like, it's not like, maybe it's not you are queer, maybe it's not that you are trans, maybe it's just you like to dress differently, or you just have a different way of doing things, and, like, standing in that and not feeling like you have to be just these things that are already here that you see, because that's also something that you are taught. That's something that we're all taught. Sadly, like, even in communities that seem very, like, free and stuff, there's still this overhead, because we've all been victims of this social structure of shaming. We've all been victims of this idea that it has to be one thing or the other. That you do have certain, groups and, like, people within the queer community that kind of have that mindset of, like, okay, it has to look like this, or, like, you have to do this and do that, and if not, like, we are going to shame you, we are going to do this and whatever. Well, obviously, like, having that mindset, and then, like, having a younger child hear that, feeling like, okay, yeah, like, okay, I am different, and, like, these people are different, and they're telling me, though, that, like, the only way that different can look is how they're doing it, and so, like, let me completely just become this person. Now, again, this is when someone just doesn't have that sense and never been taught ever to listen to themselves and to be okay with what comes up and standing in that. And so it all comes back to how you raise your children, and how, like, the urgency to destroy this social structure that is really having all of us, regardless of age, being in those types of mindsets. Just say this too, just to end it, like, when I'm talking about these things, I'm talking about it because it's actually my life. I'm seeing how it not only affects me, but those around me globally. When I'm standing in myself and I'm being super gay or whatever, that is just because of, like, who I am. I'm not trying to be gay. I'm not trying to be feminine or be women. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm not trying to be black. I am just who I am. And so when I get on social media, though, and in real life, and I stand in that, it's for me to also to feel free and to feel liberated. But it is with the intent for younger children and for those my age and older to be inspired. But that does not mean that is going to look like exactly how I am doing it and how I'm saying things and how I'm dressing and my sexuality and all that. That is not my goal. That is not my agenda to make the world queer or whatever. Like, my agenda, though, is to allow people and to let people know that we should be moving and existing in a organic state without the analyzing it through a social shaming lens. That is my goal. I feel the need to always explain why I feel like living in an organic state, being who you are without that social shaming and lens, like looking through it through that lens. I feel the importance to really explain or just give examples real quick on why that's important. When you're not in that state, when you're not in the state of shaming yourself for things you shouldn't be shaming yourself. Again, this isn't about holding yourself accountable. You should always be doing that. But when you aren't in those states and you're allowing yourself to be, you aren't in this constant mindset that is filled with fear, that is filled with anger, with confusement. Your nervous system's relaxed, your brain is relaxed. It's able to then really do its big one, but just in case you don't know what that means, but like it's able to work as it's supposed to, allowing all of us to have better means to do things like inventing things that aren't just going to help us, but help the planet. Because when you allow your brain to do what it's supposed to do, that means your critical thinking and your problem solving and like all those and your emotional, all those parts of your brains are doing what it's supposed to do. So you see what we have been able to do, even with all of the shame and all of the silencing and all of the just destruction that we have done internally on ourselves. Imagine a world where we are all in this mindset of like, no, I am going to trust that this may work. I am going to trust how I'm looking at things. I am going to believe that I hold value in who I am. Everybody, I feel like we are in these worlds and these mindsets and thinking the way that we do because we all do want love. We all do want safety. We all do want to feel important. But the ways that we've been trying to get in are just false senses of that. And so this is what I believe is going to actually give us that. That's actually going to give us community and respect for one another and understanding. Clear that it's not about not feeling like you can't change and not feeling like you can't listen to someone and try and understand them and like literally allow yourself to listen. You're going to be wrong sometimes, right? Just because of experiences that you've had that genuinely feel like, that you've gone through and you have, and in the way that you feel based off of that is valid. But that doesn't mean it's always going to be just like what the reality of it all is or what the truth may be or whatever. And so you have to make sure you allow yourself to be okay with the fact that we are all learning. We're all trying to figure it out. I cannot tell you, but you will know. When you have all the experiences, when you've heard people's perspectives and how they look at the world or whatever, you will feel what remains of who you are and what doesn't. And you should not, and allow yourself just to really surrender to that. Surrender to what is just you're standing in. Surrender to what you're like, oh no, actually, that may have changed the way I think about things.